Up next on Black Wellness.
Students in this generation that want to do big things.
Yes.
Millennials at this point, they want to change the landscape of what it means to be flexible within a workplace, and they're demanding flexibility. They're demanding, I want to be able to balance work life with play, right?
Wow.
And they're pushing those buttons and they're getting it, right? So it's almost to say, okay, fine. It's almost like these young people coming up now are trying to say, I recognize that I need to be able to have self-care, or I need to be able to reduce my stress. How do I do that? And I'm trying to figure it out, and I think in the workplace and
This show is brought to you by Scott Hill Caribbean Cuisine, fine dining located at 1943 Avenue Road, south of Highway 401 in Toronto. Listen to us live every Saturday at 7 p.m. at radioregent.com. Hello, we are live from Radio Regent. You can listen to us at www.radioregent.com. This is Black Wellness, and I'm your host, Giselle Wilson. The show is co-produced with Lori Beezer, and we also want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, Scott Hill Caribbean Cuisine. They're located at 1943 Avenue Road, just south of the 401, and you could get all your fine dining there, Jamaican style, Caribbean style. They're also open to events for any occasion. They are a venue straight for you for your anniversaries and your birthdays. So we want to thank them for being our sponsor of today's show. So with that being said, it is a bright and sunny August afternoon, August evening in Toronto, and we're coming from you live in downtown Toronto in the Regent Park area. And with our focus on mental and physical wellness in the Black community, we have two very special guests. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. But today we want to talk about our youth. We want to talk about youth, their psychology, their mental health, their physical wellness, and their approach to life in terms of talking about employment, education, socialization, in all arenas. How are today's youth thinking, and how do they measure up in terms of their wellness? So I want to put it over to my guests. They're going to introduce themselves. On to my right, your left. Start talking. Let me know.
I'm Tricia, and I am a youth and family counselor. I am based in the Vancouver area, and I'm bringing that counseling perspective to this conversation today.
Excellent. And we have Basil.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Basil Williams. I am married to this lovely young lady.
Oh.
Her name's Tricia.
Yeah.
So I decided to come along as a support, and I have been working in the school system for some time. So first as an EA, and more recently as a teacher. So I have some experience there, and I don't know what I'll be asked, but I'll do my best to share what I know, and if it's helpful, and I want to share it.
Oh, I definitely think it will be helpful, and we want all different perspectives. We eventually will have shows where we will involve a roundtable of our youth, but we want to hear from a kind of a professional standpoint and just from your observations working with that population. So I guess my first question is going to be centered around education. So both of you can probably respond to that. Well, I am a mother. I'm a parent of a 16-year-old, believe it or not.
Yes.
And so high school has been a landscape. Yes. So I just wanted to know some perspectives on the differences of education back, I guess, in my time growing up in the 70s and 80s versus the approach now. What I am finding more and more in our education system, at least here in Toronto, they're becoming less sensitive on grades. And the approach is a little bit different. It's very individualistic, and there are more measures to scholastic success. So can you speak a little bit on the approach to assessing and grading students and how that is affecting them?
Okay. Oh, wow. it is much different than when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I just got a number, and that would be it.
That would be it. A, B, C, D, E.
Right?
Yeah,
You would know what the grade is, because it would come in the report card, and there would be like a little note just telling you what the A meant and what the B meant.
That's it.
Yeah. So I would say I'll start with what the education system, from my perspective, is trying to do, is trying to assess students in such a way that it addresses the whole person.
Okay.
So there is a simplicity in some ways with a grade. If you get a B, you have a B.
Right.
There are some issues, however, is because you're blending all of the students' experiences, if they had a good day or a bad day, into a single number. And I think that for a long time, the school system has put too much emphasis on that number.
I see.
So right now, I would say that there's a lot of competing ideas about how to grade, and it comes, and from talking to parents, and obviously I feel like I'm not a parent, but talking to parents and being in the schools are really trying to assess students in such a way that they can take that feedback and do something with it. And I think it's still in flux in some ways, which makes it a little bit confusing to the parents, because they're constantly trying to teach the parents how they're trying to assess the student. So the best thing I would say is just work with the teacher, attend parent-teacher interviews. I don't understand.
Be involved with your students, with
so
your
that
parents,
they can
and
explain
your
as much as they can. I guess it's not as simple, but I think that the main point is they don't want you to feel as if this number or this letter defines your child.
And that's, I think, is the core message. I think I like the way you said that they look at the student as a whole person, especially with my particular son being on the spectrum. That's kind of important when you're addressing all learners, right? And all different states of mind and approaches. Some are more visual learners, some are more auditory, and you have all like a mix in between. Plus you have those learning curves, right? So I can really appreciate the task that teachers have, as well as parents, and it's always a negotiation, it's always a cooperation. What about from a psychological or a mental wellness point of view?
I would say, and you brought up that point of you need to take into consideration, where the child's at.
Right.
Are there learning challenges like children that are on the spectrum, or are there challenges like developmental challenges, like students that may have FASD, or students that may have ADHD, or some of those diagnosed clinical issues, and if your child does have one of these diagnoses, then you need to take extra steps. And I would say that it's sort of up in the air right now. Should that be the onus be on the school to sort of take the the best step in trying to take care of students that have special needs, or should the onus be on the parents? And I think that that's a conversation that's still going on today. Trying to figure. And I think it's hopefully both can work together to try to cater to the needs of these students that have special needs. And I think that that's the best approach, where if you know that your child has a special need, like your son has autism, then it's important to be able to get on that right away
and build a strategy, because a lot of boards and a lot of schools, they have task force, and they deal with different specialists as well that consult with the teacher and that are available to parents, so that you can come up with the best learning strategy for your child to be successful in school. I also want to talk more about wellness in terms of stress. I know over the years, like our approach to school, my approach, I guess I'm probably the oldest one in the room. Like you said, you just had to achieve that A, or you just get that letter grade or that percentage, and that's kind of what dictate where you are, your level of success and where you're going and things like that. And that's just what we strive for. But we never really thought about the mental wellness or the mental health piece in terms of the pressure we put on kids to succeed in school and to be of a certain profession, and what is the notion of success and how kids process the stresses that are in their lives, right? So I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the wellness piece when it comes to education, employment, the family dynamic. How do we parent kids in this generation that they seem to be very different with their ideals and their goals?
That's a big question. And I would say that, to say positively, we have, students in this generation that want to do big things.
Yes.
Millennials at this point, they want to change the landscape of what it means to be flexible within a workplace, and they're demanding flexibility. They're demanding, I want to be able to balance work life with play, right?
Wow.
And, they're pushing those buttons and they're getting it, right? So it's almost to say, okay, fine. It's almost like these young people coming up now are trying to say, I recognize that I need to be able to have self-care, or I need to be able to reduce my stress. How do I do that? And they're trying to figure it out, and I think in the workplace, and, I've worked in many different professions, and basically in the workplace now, they're trying to figure out, okay, how do we keep millennials?
Yeah.
And they're recognizing they have to have flexibility. They have to, try to figure out training opportunities, development. So what I would say to parents, when you're thinking of your child and they're in school now trying to figure out what do they do, I would say listen. Listening is the biggest piece. Trying to understand, where are they at in their, mindset. And there's so many different job options out there. Like I think back in the day, people would just go to school.
Yeah.
Either you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a
Traditional
lawyer.
careers, you go
right?
to university, and that's just the end of the story. Yeah.
And nowadays, that's not the case. Like you could go to school, you could become a nurse, but you come out and you do something else with that degree, or you go to school, you become a lawyer and you do something else with that degree. So nowadays, you have jobs that are, so far and in between when it comes to what you can do with it.
Yeah.
So what I would say is listen to your children, support them as much as you can, and make sure that the environment at home is a safe one, that they can come home and talk to you about what their struggles are.
That's so true.
Because sometimes these kids, they feel like they're pressured to go to school. As you said, they think, oh, I have to go to college, especially within the Black community. You feel that pressure, because especially Caribbean parents.
That's the notion of success. A lot of immigrant families, they come here for a reason. They've given you opportunities.
Exactly.
So, you have to capitalize on it.
So if you don't go to university, you're not becoming successful. But in this day and age, we know that there are different ways of becoming successful. You have individuals that become plumbers, or they go into a trade, and they're making so much more money than people who go and do a 4-year, degree at a university. So I would say just listen to your children. Sometimes they have passions and they want to pursue certain things, and because, they feel that pressure, sometimes, I've worked also in the clinical environment within universities, and, the students, they're basically saying, I don't think that I'm good enough, because they've always felt like they have to get A's.
Right.
Sometimes, and I'm going to get sticky here, sometimes they even go to the point of saying, I'm going to take my life, because they feel so pressured by parents, by society to live up to.
And if they don't fit that mold, then they just feel it's not worth it anymore.
Exactly.
That's true. What do you think, Basil?
I'll just go right off of that idea of the 4.0 culture, and it's a problem. And there's one thing that I end up telling students when I was an EA as a teacher or anything, that it seems to come down to advice that my mom gave me when I was very young. A little bit of a story.
Please.
First, when I was very young, we had a different testing. And I did pretty badly on my first testing. And I was kind of joked up about it.
Right.
But my mom reminded me that what you score does not define you. It just tells you what you need to work on. And in school, your grades are talking about what you need to work on academically. And I'll just kind of go through what I've usually said. So academics is one part of your growth. There's other parts of your growth that makes you you and makes you special. So just because you did badly on this test doesn't mean that you're not growing as a person. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden your worth goes down. It just means that you did badly on this test at this time. People mature at different rates. People get things at different rates. And so we're talking about academics. There's still social. There's still emotional intelligence. There's still, as Tricia was talking about, being able to work with your hands and having that type of, there's so many different types of intelligence that you don't really want to, I don't want to say you shouldn't care about your grades, but it
You shouldn't
doesn't,
box.
It should define
Yeah.
you.
yeah, and so, and in some ways it's sort of the education system has kind of pushed that idea that, getting an A isn't enough anymore. You got to have a 4.0 or better than that. And it just puts so much stress on them. It's like you need time to develop. And sometimes you're going to make mistakes, and there's nothing wrong with that because
It's okay
you're
to
a
have that
person.
C.
It's okay to, you heard it here, it's okay to have a C.
That's how
They will work with it and
Yeah.
figure out what exactly that means. It could
Yeah,
mean a
so-
bad day. It could mean a comprehension level, meaning not necessarily scholastic or academic. It could just mean maybe the question was phrased in a way that the child doesn't recognize or needs further explanation on. There's challenges in different areas. So I guess you guys are both advocating for qualification, qualify certain measures and coming
Yeah.
up with different measures that altogether kind of shows the progress of the child at that particular time.
Yeah. So that's usually what I've said. So at this point, working in the education system, you want to work within the education system, and I can't lie that if you're applying to a school, that getting a bad grade may hurt you to some degree. But don't let it define you, because that number is not you. It's not your potential. It's not you. It's a single score that is just a single score in the whole scheme of the vastness of who you are.
Right.
And that's definitely the message that parents can definitely share with their child. Like when their child comes home crying, like didn't do really well and such, encourage,
Yes.
and indicate that you'll do better on the next one, sort of thing. And I think that that's sort of the safety that they need within the families and within the schools.
Well, now we talked about education. Now let's talk about the home. So we can appreciate that kids, students, they spend X amount of time in the schools. They're spending like 6+ hours at school, but the other half is at home, and they're coming from a variety of home situations. So how do we bridge a better connection? How do parents bridge a better connection with their young ones, with their kids, with their young adults, with their teenagers? What do you think are some of the gaps and the problems, and what are some key solutions to overcome that? Sorry, I like to kind of push. Mind you, I am a parent, and I know with my experience, this is a bit of a landscape. Like I said, my son is going to be mid-teens, and it's a different type of parenting. For me, I believe in parenting in phases kind of thing, and I've noticed that I've had to let go. Like the one major thing is negotiating between parenting, guiding, and independence, and allowing them to have certain friendships and relationships, allowing them to go to places on their own. Meanwhile, you have to keep a kind of a close eye, because that is a time where they are alone and they could be isolated in their thoughts, and they're a little bit immature emotionally, and so it's like a landmine. Like you have a little adult that has the ability to make decisions that can change their lives.
Oh, definitely.
So how, as a parent, do I better parent a child that doesn't want to be parented anymore?
I would definitely say lifespan, depending on the age of your child. And I think you're talking about teenage years. And those are definitely the
or even when you're
years.
young, bending that tree when it's small and
Yeah.
building that relationship. Like it's difficult for parents too.
And there are no perfect parents out there. And I want to just normalize that. There are no perfect parents out there, and you're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, what I would say is there's no book that on parenting for sure, but there are definitely things that you can look out for, right? So there are stages that you can look out for. So when a child's in the infancy stage, you definitely want to ensure that their basic needs are being met and that they feel secure within their environment. Okay, and then the next stage is they get into infancy and they're moving around, so they want to make sure they're safe, like secure within their space, right, in that moving around stage. And then they get a bit older where they're going to school now, and how others think of them is important. So peer support, they're also trying to understand the world based on that perspective. So they're in middle school maybe, or they're in elementary or whatever, and what their friends think is important. So as a parent, you're going to have to tune into that. And a lot of times you're going to be like, you know, I have this friend, but I don't have this friend tomorrow. And you know, there's that shift in mind, right? And then you get into those teenage years, you know, and everything goes haywire. Everything goes haywire. And, you know, in that stage, as you said, they're trying to battle with individuality. They're trying to battle with identity, you know, because they moved out of that stage of, you know, what do my friends think? But in this stage, you're like, who am I? Right? So not just what do my friends think, they're adding on who am I to that situation. And, you know, I think this is where parents come in, and it's not just at this point, which is a critical point. All along, you're helping them to form their identity, right? So, you know, it's important that you do that from their younger. And I remember my mom would say, you know, every child has a personality. Aww. And she would, you know, she would tell us, you know, myself and my two brothers, how different we were and how our personalities
My mother
were.
said the same thing between me and my brother. We are two totally different personalities, which would require two different parenting styles.
Right? Exactly.
You
so you sort of have to
the same.
Exactly. So you have to tailor your parenting style to the child and their personality. And, you know, by the time they get to the adolescent years, you would know so much about them that you'll be able to guide them through that age. And as you said, do that letting go, which is difficult to do because they do need that independence to be able to own who they are.
And have a different level of security, like believing in themselves and knowing that they can do it outside of what their parents have provided them.
Exactly.
What do you think, Basil?
What do I think?
I love the male perspective here because as females we're very vocal. So
all right. We just go back. You were asking about what parents can do with the students.
Yeah, and just with their kids, like from a parenting perspective.
Yeah. So, of course, I would say I agree with everything Tricia's saying here, and I'm thinking a little bit about how, in particular, I've mostly worked with teenagers. Are developing, like they are really trying to figure things out, and I think it's just very important for them to have that support at home, like to know that you're there for them. The other thing is the schools are really battling with technology.
What's that battle?
Yes.
That battle.
Are they winning?
Us versus the computer.
Oh my gosh, it's like the Matrix 1984, the Terminator. What reference should I give?
I would, I don't want to speak poorly. I'd like to say they're fighting the good fight, but it's not looking so wonderful at the moment. And it's a difficult one because the landscape's changing a lot. You're dealing with things like the obvious, like cyberbullying.
Right.
There's definitely newer ways of cheating than there before, and students are very creative in their ability to work around the rules. So that even makes assessment a little bit harder. But let's stay with their wellness for a second. I think that the most success, because especially when I was in EA, I got to go to different schools a lot. The teachers that I thought that had the most success with dealing with technology didn't deal with knowing like the latest in Twitter or Snapchat or whatever. They dealt with values.
Okay.
So teaching the students to be respectful with how they're using their cell phones. So for example, if they're in the cell phone, if they're in class and they're using their cell phones, when somebody's speaking to you, you should put down your phone and actually listen to them and look at them and communicate with them before continuing what you're doing.
Right.
Just those type of values. So, and just being respectful. So, you know, remembering to thank people. If somebody's doing something, maybe give them an encouraging word. Those type of things, regardless of how they're sending it, whether it's a Snapchat or this, if they're encouraging people, that's really what you want.
Yeah.
Right.
Then trying to be like, well, I need to know this technology, or generally you're not going to be able to keep up. That's really the truth.
This is true.
Wow.
So it's more important that they have those values and they're comfortable with talking to you about it. So what's happened actually in one school that I know that had like a complete ban is that cyberbullying would kind of fluster because they would text each other in secret and they wouldn't talk to anybody about it. So by the time you know about it, it's just blown out of proportion. Whereas if they are comfortable with talking to you about it and you've been teaching them those values, when certain things happen, and this happens more in younger grades, like kind of middle schoolish, they'll actually speak to you, like because they're hurt, right?
Yeah.
And they don't think, oh, I'm not allowed to talk about it, or I'm not allowed to be using this, so I'm just going to hide it.
Right.
So definitely just being involved and values. I'd be more value-based than worrying about knowing every single thing, so that, and of course, as Trish is saying, them being safe to being able to come to you.
That's very important. For those who are just tuning in, you're listening to Black Wellness. I'm your host, Giselle Wilson, co-produced with Lori Beezer. We're on each and every Saturday from 7 to 8 p.m. on Radio Regent. You're listening to us live at radioregent.com. And we'd like to thank you for always tuning in. We talk about wellness and health from a cultural perspective as it relates to the Black community. And we bring to you a lot of different guests from the community, those on the professional end of things, all the way down to community members, just to find out and to source out better information to help us in our wellness, both mentally, physically, and even on a spiritual level. So we'd like to thank our guests for being here. We also want to acknowledge our sponsor, which is Scott Hill Caribbean Cuisine. They are located at 1947 Avenue Road, south of the 401. They are available for all your special occasions, Jamaican style, fine dining cuisine. So they're wonderful. You need to check them out at scotthillcuisine.com. So I want to get back to our conversation. I'm here talking with Basil and Tricia-Kay. They are husband and wife, but they're also professionals. Tricia is a counselor and Basil is a teacher. So we couldn't get better people to talk about this youth psyche. We're trying to create a profile so we can better understand our youth and better support them in everything that they do. So we were just talking about technology and the impact of technology. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, especially when it comes to socialization and how our kids are growing up today, as opposed to our era or my era, where it was more like television, like MTV, much music was kind of preoccupying our time and kind of shaping who we were as young adults. Now we have the internet, we have YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, how is this impacting our culture today as young people? And what's the impact on their socialization? Are they more reclusive? How do they communicate? Like, what are the impacts and how do we deal with that?
I would say that there's a lot more isolation, and you think because they're on social media and they're having more friends, and I'm going to put that in quotes, friends.
What is a friend
right?
in this generation?
So I really feel that word has become convoluted because, again, what is a friend? Because back in the day, a friend is a close person.
Literally a friend that you saw, you called them, you knew your friend.
Right?
Yeah.
You could tell your secrets to and it would be safe, right? But today, a friend is just a person that, accepted your request on Facebook or on Instagram and is liking your pictures and stuff. So, at this point, it makes it easier for, somebody on the internet to, say bad things about you, like the cyberbullying, for example, because they don't have that emotional connection to you, right? So they have that. They can hide behind the screens. They can hide behind, the phone and the screen because they really don't know you, right? So I think that's broken down. So interpersonal relationships have broken down in a sense. So people haven't really, and I don't think it's just youth. I think people in general, are not creating the time to make true connections with others, right? And I think that's sort of what the social media aspect has done in a negative way. Yeah, for sure. And I think that it makes people a bit more isolated because they're not, again, making those connections. They're not going out to community events. They're not making those friendships because they're just on the phone or on the computer.
It's true. In one end, technology has accelerated everything and has made certain things easier for us to connect with, but then on the other way, we're disconnected. And we have to unplug, as they say, in order to make those quality connections in person. To qualify in person, it's almost like online dating. Like you can get into a relationship. And we could even talk about that. Like, it's impacted so much of our world. It's not even just making friends, the way we do business, but even how we find our mates. A lot of people are finding, their mates online, right? Like even the way I found my husband, it wasn't even online, but it was a distance kind of a situation. But I qualified him. Like it was a phone, we met, it wasn't this intermediary technological system trying to qualify who my ideal mate was. What do you think about that in terms of the dating scene, young people finding people? Is that a good or a bad? I've never done online dating before.
I've seen positives because I did a bit of online dating before I found my lovely husband here.
Yeah.
And I would say that I did have good conversations with individuals, right? And I what I would say the positive is it gives you the opportunity to talk to them first. You get the opportunity to stay from afar.
That's true.
And get to know the person, as you said, to qualify them before you give them your phone number, for example, or you meet them in person, right? The negative part of it, however, is a lot of these dating sites are either catfishing, right, or which is a scam,
right,
or a lot of people are on there just to get the goods, right, which is the negative about that, unless that you're into that. But I would say that that's the other side of it, where a lot of people who are looking for love or looking for a real connection or relationship, they're annoyed or bored or not wanting to engage and feel that, oh my God, I can't find the right
and
person.
This is why, especially as young people, we have to be careful in terms of this whole socialization and relationship conversation that we're having. We're trying to find out the challenges and how we can better equip them, make sure that they can find their friends, true friends that care about them and that engage with them in positive ways, right, safely and appropriately. What do you think about that in terms of socialization, technology, relationships?
Going back to the parents. I think that we've been talking about getting to know people in person. I think that as parents, you are at the forefront of who they interact with, as people. And the more that they learn how to be able to relate with you and relate with their friends, and if you're encouraging them to relate with their friends other than just over their text message or whatever medium they choose to use at this point in time, the more it'll be easier for them to be able to make a connection. So I'm thinking my mind kind of wandered to a few people or coworkers who I know that have met people who they've married online, but all of them were able to form very good relationships in person, right? So they may have met the person online, they may have spoken to them online, but they built the relationship in person, right? So in some ways you can reach out and meet more people, but unless you can actually, I'll go back to that emotional intelligence that seems to be developed primarily, and Tricia can correct me if I'm wrong, through interpersonal relationship, like in person, reading their body language, things like that, then it's going to be difficult for anybody that you meet, regardless of where you met them, for it to actually foster into a meaningful relationship.
No, I would qualify that for sure. Like I would say that the way we met, we met at a church.
So it was in a social situation.
It was in a social situation, and that gives, the opportunity, as you said, to check in with the nonverbals, to talk to each other and such. And I do think that online dating can provide that. But I think a lot of people in today's society, there's that block of safety. Is this person safe? And I think that that's the difference with organic meet, right, where you meet the person in a community setting.
That's right.
Right? Whereas there's so many people on this app where you have no idea who they are, right? So you sort of want to have that buffer of safety. So I would say I doubt some of that stuff.
And eventually we would have to do both, right? So it's like either you meet online or you could sustain a relationship through communication, like online communication means, or you can meet in a social situation. So we're saying that there's positives and negatives, I guess, to both types, right?
So I would sum it up as, they really want to be forming real relationships so that they can recognize what that actually looks like, regardless of where they met that person. The other thing, just going back a little bit to having all these friends and the quote unquote friends that come on social media. One of the things, this kind of goes back to grades, is because the liking system or the reaction system has made a way of grading your
Yes.
friendships.
Yes.
And when I talk to students, it's as if they assess who they are by how many likes they get. And it's very easy because it's a single number, just like a single grade. And it's difficult to kind of pull them away from that and be like, well, just because your post didn't get, 100 likes or whatever doesn't mean that it wasn't meaningful to the people that saw it. And they might agree with me for a moment, but usually they kind of go back to where they were, because it's hard, and I understand it because I feel the same way. I won't deny that. I'll put something on Instagram and I'm watching the counter,
the likes.
but I have to remind myself the same thing I tell them. It's like, look, the amount of likes that I have does not assess its worth. Just like the grade that you get on a test is not your worth. Like, you're going to have to do your best to separate it, and I would say that it's going to be difficult. So if it's hard, it's going to be, because it's hard not to, especially when you see like 1,000 likes on somebody's thing. You're like,
How did they get that? Yeah, that's true.
Well, on one way, it's so funny because it seems like what we're saying is like the grading system has moved from one arena to another.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's an amazing point that you just made. And it's like, how do we take that? Now we're moving that from an academic stream to a social stream.
Yes.
And that can affect self-esteem. So what are the challenges with that, especially when it comes to youth issues, like you're saying, cyberbullying, suicide, a whole bunch of body imaging. I don't even know. How does that reflect on that? Would that attribute to maybe an increase among young populations with these issues? And how do we combat that? If we feel that as an adult, it's like, oh my God.
And I definitely sympathize. I can't say that I don't sympathize, because I didn't grow up that way. I'm accustomed to being able to just turn my phone off and be like, whatever.
Yeah.
But they don't feel that. And I appreciate that they don't feel that. And I can encourage it as much as I want, but they're a different person living in a different world. So
yeah, I would definitely say that it has increased. Low self-esteem has increased. I would say that the suicide rate has increased. I wouldn't say it's just a social media sort of issue. It's very convoluted with a lot of other types of issues, with feeling hopeless based on other issues that are going on within that person's life.
That's right.
And I would say that social media may be contributing to the root issue of what that person's going through if they get to that place.
Because that's the world for them. That's part of the world for them, right?
Yeah.
So what messages are coming out of that world kind of reflects to how they think.
Yes. So it's either confirming that bias of the world is not a good place and I shouldn't be here, or it's, as Baz says, if they're getting lots of likes, it's saying, oh, I belong here, or this is great for me, type of thing, and it goes back again to the family, because I as a counselor, I am, systems based, and I believe that everything originates with the family. And I think that, if your child, or if you're within a secure, safe, supportive family system, when issues come up, or even if it's like anxiety or depression or such, and you have a community or a system that you're able to air those concerns and stuff like that, then it limits the possibility of you having I guess of you getting to the point where you commit suicide, for example. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but you are within that safety net, or that supportive group that would help you to be able to get help, for example, or be able to see some of the signs that would be able to pull you out of something like that. But there are individuals out there that don't have that, right? And it makes it difficult for them. So that's why there are community supports out there, and hopefully, people are getting supported by that. But it's challenging. And if you go onto social media and you get the negativity that's on there, especially if you're in that mindset, then it just pushes over the edge. And talking about that idea of body image, Instagram has blown up these days, and even celebrities and bodybuilders or exercise gurus, especially for girls, have recently recognized how significant it is to wear no makeup, or to share how a woman's body looks if they're not flexing, for example. So a bodybuilder, I don't remember her hashtag or her name on Instagram, but she basically said, okay, I'm going to post a photo of what my body looks like when I'm not all muscled up. Nice. And, she showed the muscled up photo on one side, and she showed a photo of basically her just being relaxed.
Yeah.
And she said, look, I have a pouch. I have a little belly, and this is what normal looks like, right? So yes, you'll from time to time see me flexing, but that's my job.
Right.
Right.
And it's good to, kids need to know the reality of things.
Exactly.
And I think that part of it is us. Part of us is about revealing the truth.
Exactly.
And putting it in context for them to see, to say, it's okay, we are all unique.
Yes.
We have good days and bad days and cheat days and all different types of days. They need to see us as human because we are their mentors.
Exactly.
You talked a little bit about signs. What are the signs for youth at risk if they are experiencing trouble? What should parents and caregivers and other people of authority kind of look for, and how do you approach that?
So signs, I would say it depends. So there might be signs of hiding. Like, I know teenagers tend to avoid, and they're by themselves most of the time, so that might not be a good one for them, but they may do it more than normal. Okay. Right? Or you may see them hanging with a certain crowd that they wouldn't normally hang with, right? Or, there are examples of sometimes it depends on what's happening to them. So maybe something's happening to them and they may have bruises on them or something like that, right? Or they may be all of a sudden speaking negatively about themselves, right? So there's that as well. So just think, listen, try to listen to what they're saying, and if it's become suddenly negative, that the world is not good anymore, I'm not good anymore, or I want to die, you want to really listen to specific words, so sense of hopelessness, not feeling like doing anything, so not wanting to go to school, for example, or not wanting to, especially parents have a morning routine, not wanting to do their morning routine,
routine disruption.
Exactly.
Okay. What are the obligations from an educator point of view? So if you see signs, what do you do? Do you have an obligation to tell parents, or what happens in that case?
Usually I would go and speak to whoever is next up above me.
Okay.
In some instances, there is the obligation to speak to parents. It really kind of depends on what it is, and there are other people who are definitely more qualified to diagnose it than I am. But I would say that when I'm looking at teens in general, I would say that I'm kind of looking for drastic changes in behavior.
Okay.
So teens are experimenting, so they're going to do different things, right? They're trying to figure themselves out. So they'll do different things from time to time, and, you might see somebody show up and you're like, well, what's that? But there's certain changes that are drastic, and they just kind of stay there.
Yeah.
So if I was grading a student's grade and they were doing pretty well, and then all of a sudden it drops and it just stays down there.
Yeah.
That would be a warning sign. Or if their dress completely changes, and not just a little, but just this complete change to you don't recognize them. Wow. And it doesn't really stay, because you can't tell that they're really experimenting. It's just they made this change and it's stuck. So those type of things, just something that's drastic, and it's almost like a new normal that's so far from where they were that
it's making an impact.
It makes an impact.
Yep.
So
that's stuff that you see and that you have to address, I guess, formally first within your administration, and then stage how you inform the family.
And especially when I was in EA, I would be working under a resource teacher, so I would report what I'm seeing to the resource teacher, and they might ask me to do different things, and it would kind of go up that way. But as a teacher, then the next stage would be I usually would speak to other teachers whether or not they notice things. And And then I would speak to somebody else or one of the counselors in the school and find out exactly what the best course of action, because you don't want to, you know,
jump the gun.
Exactly.
Let's just say you don't want to jump the gun.
Yeah,
You have to qualify everything. And we appreciate that it's a process.
It is a process.
Right? I also want to ask too, what do you think the importance is of counseling to families, even if you do it preemptively, not when there is a crisis, but just as a support to parenting and to checking in with your kids, checking in with your parents, making sure everything's okay. Should families go to counseling?
I would say yes.
Of course you would say yes.
So I would,
No, joking.
I would say yes, but I would caution as well with children. You don't want to introduce counseling too early to children. You want to always look, and counselors may not agree with me with this, but I think that, there can be damage if you're introducing counseling too soon, especially if there are other things that you can do within your family structure. So what I would suggest is parents could go to counseling, and then we do counseling with the parents to help them support kids, depending on what the issue is. But if, if, there is a specific issue with the child then you'd want to cater specific,
to that child's needs.
Yes, exactly. Yes, like play therapy or, other interventions that are specific to the child's needs.
Right.
But yeah, I would say not that it's a last resort, but depending on what the issue is, you want to always focus in on the family dynamics and then put it out to the child. Now there are, youth and children out there who want counseling and they will ask for it, sort of thing. And then they can go to counseling on their own depending on how old they are. So mature youth are like 14, 15, 16 going up that age. So sometimes they will go into a youth center or they'll go into different agencies to try to get counseling for themselves, right? So I would say, advocate for that. If they're asking for it, definitely they're at a point where they need it. For sure.
And don't deny them their access. For those listening in, we are talking about our youth. And we're building a profile here of how they think, how this generation is progressing, especially their wellness. So far, what I'm learning so far is that they are definitely different thinkers. They're sensitive to social media, obviously. They don't think in strict lines. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities for them. Like, whereas we grew up, we kind of went into traditional careers. For them, they want accommodation. They want to make sure that there is a balance, stress level balance, mental wellness balance versus achievement through work, different types of work, working from home. They're digital nomads. All kinds of stuff is happening with them. When it comes to the academic, there's a landscape that is changing in terms of the measures and taking into account the whole person, the whole student. Sometimes a grade is only a measure of the day. You could be having a good day, bad day. There could be a lot of different things in between. So, and on a parenting level, it's always listening to your kids and listening with open eyes and open ears. There are signs to look out for when there is youth at risk. And there's also just listening in general. Sometimes we just don't listen to our kids when they are talking to us and telling us directly what they need. So it's being present and listening, and they want that level of engagement. Society on a whole, we are not getting as engaged, especially with the impact of technology. So there is also a sense of craving for human contact, getting to know your families, seeing the real self. Even though we're in this artificial world at times, people want to even see the real self online. So it's for parents to be real with their kids because they can see, they know, they can sense, so don't belittle their intelligence. And I think from there, that's a good basis for them to build trust and communication. So this is kind of the profile we're building. Now we want to talk more about youth at risk. So we want to talk about the impact of violence. I know Toronto's went through a recent kind of escalation in violence. We've had a lot of festivals going on. I think for the August long weekend, there was 14 shootings, things like that. And I know that there's a response from the wider community, from the police departments, all this kind of stuff, trying to address that. Not to say that Black youth or not youth were involved, not to say that, not to say it was solely youth. But it's more to say if youth are involved, why do they get involved in gun violence? Why do they get involved in gangs? And what is the psychology going on there?
It sounds like a sense of belonging. They want to belong somewhere, and I think as human beings, we're created to be in community. We're created to belong to something, right? And youth at risk, depending on what's going on with them within their family life, what they have versus what they don't have, if they find a sense of community and belonging within a group, that group could be a violent group, a gang, right? And it's sort of figuring out, you know, what do they get from this that they're not getting from home or getting from, you know, positive friendships.
That's right.
And I think that that's sort of the root of the issue, you know, what's lacking at home. And then, you know, there could be that sense of responsibility as well. They're given duties, they're given chores, and they're given things
Even
to
the
do.
level of attention, you know,
Exactly.
for them
There's
to
purpose.
get attention on the outside, there must be a lack of attention on the inside, maybe. And I'm not trying to suggest anything.
Just possibilities,
right? Yeah. What do you think about, you know, weed is a big thing in the news, marijuana? A lot more people, it's becoming more socially acceptable. So what does that mean to our young people? Because from my time, it was seen as, for example, as a gateway drug, and not to put it down or knock it, but it does have to be used responsibly. So how does that work when you're dealing with young people and their use of marijuana? You know, they're growing up in an age where it's legal.
Yes.
Well, if I'm honest, I haven't haven't had to deal with it for a lot because most of my time in the schools, it's been illegal, right? So I think many are kind of scrambling to figure out the best way to deal with certain things.
What's the policy at the school you're working at now?
The policy, well, no drugs.
That's right.
Yes.
That's usually.
But reality.
Yes.
So we want to do with reality.
Yes.
The reality is people are using it recreationally. People are using it medicinally, right? For many uses without judgment.
Yes.
But it needs to be monitored and controlled. And how does that work in the school environment? How does that work at home, right?
I know in urban centers, for example, like even in Toronto, Vancouver, you know, it's a big thing, right? And I don't know. I feel like that idea that it's legal now takes away that onus of, you know, they have to hide and do it. So, you know, adults in a sense are like, oh, this is an open thing. I don't have to. So I don't know if it's increasing violence. Marijuana, that may have maybe reduced. But I think in a sense it's becoming more social where people are using it more in a social setting, you know, and that idea of using responsibly is something that we need to definitely talk about, especially with our teens. Because it's still illegal for them. Right? And I don't know if a lot of individuals out there are teaching that idea of it's still illegal for, you know, youth under 19 years old.
Wow, well, there you go. So we need to have those conversations. That's kind of like how back in the day, our parents really were uncomfortable talking to us about sex, right? So now it's like we have to have the sex and the marijuana conversations and be open to the new society, to the new way of life and being and making choices versus right choices and decision making and all of that kind of stuff. I know we're kind of winding down our conversation, but what is your overall consensus and prognosis on the future of our young people? They're the next generation taking over the world. So what do you think? What is your, I don't know, what do you grade them at? Is it a bright future?
I think they're going to do great things. Like I think they're doing great things right now. Yes, we're always going to have challenges with young people. We're always going to have challenges within our society in getting young people to a certain place. But I think, you know, millennials and even the generation after, you know, they're big on pushing for what they need and what they want, and especially that balance I talked about earlier. You know, that balance between family life, that balance between work life, that balance between, you know, play life, and making sure they're having fun. They're pushing for that, and I think that that's sort of where we are in this society, especially with women's rights, and especially with, you know, other types of rights, LGBTQ rights.
That's right.
You know what I mean? They're speaking up and they're talking, you know, and I feel like they're strong and they're going to make an impact, especially within those areas when it comes to rights and freedoms.
Right. What's the outlook for you?
Oh, okay. Well, I kind of smile because, you know, there's kind of feel either way sometimes, but all in all, I would say that I'm hopeful. I do worry about students. I try to share what I think are my concerns from time to time, but
Right.
I do think that they'll eventually figure things out.
Every
I think every
generation
generation
has
has
their
a
challenges.
specific challenge.
That's right.
And I've shared that I think that their challenge is going to be mostly social and emotional, like being able to actually form real connections. And I don't think that you can't. I don't think that there's something intrinsically wrong with them, but I think that is their challenge. Because it's just very easy to go through this modern landscape and not develop any empathy for anybody.
That's very true.
So that's their challenge, but and I've met a lot of students that are very caring and wonderful people, so I am hopeful. But I do worry about it. I can't deny that I'm worried about the fact that empathy seems to be on the decline.
Well, you know what? I have a good outlook. Like you said, every generation has their challenges, but we are hopeful that with more information and more conversations, people can make better, educated decisions. And that's the number one thing. That's what we try to do here at Black Wellness, is to provide information and to provide different perspectives so people can have an educated decision-making process, and that they can have access to support. That's a big one, to let them know that these resources are there, and to speak up if there is an issue. Know that it's not so defeatist, that there are ways and different ways, traditional and non-traditional ways, to get out of a situation. So we want to thank you so much, Tricia and Basil, for coming on the show, sharing your perspective. Yes, it was great talking with you. We definitely want to get some youth on the show so that they can kind of look at this interview and see what the reality is for them. So I thought this was very informative. We can't wait to share this with our audience. If you want to check us out on social media, please check out our Facebook group. So we have a group, Black Wellness. We also have our shows posted at Support Black Wellness Now. Also check out our website, www.blackwellness.ca, and you can listen to the live podcast. You have been listening to the live podcast at radioregent.com. So please check in, email us, blackwellnessworldwide@gmail.com. And we'd like to give a special shout out to our sponsor and supporter of this show and many more, Scott Hill Caribbean Cuisine. They're located at 1943 Avenue Road, south of the 401. They're available for all your special engagements. They deal with fine dining and Caribbean cuisine. So we look forward to seeing you there. So next week, a lot of things are happening for the month of August. We have the Empress Walk, which is happening on the 17th. We hope to see you there at Pioneer Village. Stay tuned for all that information. And also on the 24th, we will be live at the Pickering Flea Market with Mansa and the crew. It's going to be amazing. We're celebrating Black female beauty. So please continue to stay posted to all the information at our website and social media. And we will see you next week. I've been Giselle Wilson, and this is Black Wellness. Thank you for listening. This show is brought to you by Scott Hill Caribbean Cuisine, fine dining located at 1943 Avenue Road, south of Highway 401 in Toronto. Listen to us live every Saturday at 7 p.m. at radioregent.com.